about the prayer in Speaker's Corner and these things. What we've done is we've deliberated and we've consulted with a lot of the, like, let's say, elders and seniors and people of knowledge, and we've come with a policy conclusion as to how we're going to deal with basically this whole idea of praying in congregation and all these things which now the police have reminded us about, which are part of the policies of the Royal Parks. It's important to realise that the Royal Parks is a charity which is owned by the Crown, and now that the police, since I think 2004, have been the enforcers of the Royal Parks. And if you look into the regulations of the Royal Parks, it says that it's not permissible for any religious group to congregate and pray. So that doesn't discriminate in any way against any particular religion. It speaks generally about all religion. And the reasoning it gives, it says, is that because the public harm is more than the public benefit. So what we have to do, after discussing it with the people, this is what we've come to. First and foremost, one important distinction is that it talks about congregational prayer and not individual prayer. So if you look at the regulations in the Royal Parks, it says that you're not allowed to congregate for religious purposes, i.e. worship. So that's congregational prayer and not individual prayer. So if anyone is in the Royal Parks, according to my knowledge, until I'm corrected, and who wants to pray individually, whether they be male or female, whether they be Muslim or non-Muslim, and they want to pray individually, there should be no restriction to do that. So if anyone wants to pray individually in Speaker's Corner, aside Speaker's Corner, on the grass, or anywhere, that's individually, that can be done according to the regulations. However, praying in congregation, here is a problem because the regulations are put in place for a reason. And as Muslims, we have to be respectful of that, especially considering that we have available resources elsewhere, especially around the area. So what we want to do is we want to publicly declare that we want to be in line with the police policy, or sorry, the Royal Park policy of no congregation in Speaker's Corner, and that from our level we're not going to try and go against the regulation, because this is not from the Islamic spirit. In fact, one of the ahadith of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which is mentioned in Tirmidhi, is when he talks about 6 or 7 things which places you're not allowed to pray in. One of the places is a tariq, so the place of where people walk. And of the people to do sharh of this hadith or explanation of this hadith, they say the reason why we don't do it in this place is because it causes hassle for other people. So as Muslims, we don't want to cause hassle for Muslims or other non-Muslims. Yeah, because as you guys know, or you should know, that our religion is not a religion which is attempting to make things harder for people, generally speaking. However, and this is where we say however, right? If you look at the royal policies or the regulations, it also says that this has to be enforced of all religions and not one specific religion. And that if it's not going to be allowed for one religion, it must not be allowed for all religions. Now, we have noticed that there are some African people that are of Christian background that come round and congregate, and that they play with the tambourines in a religious worship, and sometimes they have not been recommended by the police to stop or desist what they're doing. So what we want to say is that to try and avoid this kind of discrimination, which we would consider exclusivizing the Muslims in this treatment of reprimand, we have also put a policy in place to protect our own interests as the Muslim community. Now, this is called the 3-strike policy. Wait a minute, what's going on now? Yes, it's called the 3-strike policy.
As you know, for the 3 options.
Yeah, so 3 is an odd number. The 3-strike policy works in the following way. We have a panel of Muslims, of 5 Muslims, known to the people of the park. Most of them will be known to the people of the park, and their names will be released maybe shortly, yeah? 5 is an odd number, so a decision always has to be made. It will be like a consultative process, and a decision always has to be made. If any evidence is produced to us as the Muslim community that the police is failing to reprimand other religious people from other faiths when they are worshipping in congregation, and that happens more than 3 times, and there is good enough evidence, the panel of 5 Muslims will decide whether that is something which necessitates a strike. If it happens 3 times, then we will go back to protesting in the form of praying in the corner. Why? Because we would say that in this case the police is discriminating against the Muslims, and they're not doing something which is in the interest of the wider community, and in fact they're exclusivizing the Muslims in discriminatory actions. However, we hope that this doesn't happen. we hope that the police doesn't go down that route, because obviously there is an institutional racism attached to, or a stigma of institutional racism already attached to the police after Stephen Lawrence and these things, especially with the black community. And this will only exacerbate the already existing hate within minorities for the police. So this won't happen. I'm sure the police won't go down that route. So just to show that we are an independent, autonomous community of people, we will not tolerate also, just as we will not tolerate Muslims, we will advise Muslims not to pray in congregation because that is against the regulation of the park. We will also not tolerate a discrimination of Muslims in the park. And I don't think anyone from a democratic perspective, an Islamic perspective, a Christian perspective, a Jewish perspective, or any other perspective would be able to disagree with what we are saying here and now today. And this is what we have decided. I think that generally speaking, as Muslims, we need to work on building bridges with other communities, but other communities also need to work on understanding and building bridges with Muslims. This is the decision that's been authorized by many of the, let's say, senior people of from the Muslim community of Speakers Corner. Do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, the one thing I just wanted to point out is, like, Masha, you covered all of it, is that we have in the park hate preachers, very clear-cut hate preachers. And when you need to understand something, brothers and sisters, is that when this is being enforced, it's not being enforced because a policy regulation in the park is being violated. Wallahi, it's not that. Be very clear that this was not done because there was a policy that was being violated. It wasn't. The reason it's being done, and let me tell you guys, I want to go to Surah Buruj verse 7, even though it kind of correlates with it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, and we were watching what they were doing with the believers. They punished them for nothing but that they believed in Allah, the Almighty, the worthy of all praise. So Allah's talking about here with the polytheists and what they were doing to the believing men and the believing women. Now, I'm not saying to you this is what's going today and they're persecuting us. No, I just want to notify you guys that this is a step towards that. Because you know why? It's because of the hatred that they have towards us Muslims. Why? Because we prayed here, we prayed it. We didn't harm anybody. We would make sure the brothers will make sure that we're not blocking paths. So the only reason, and this is the lady who started, this was a lady who I spoke to first when Tommy Robinson came. She took a bacon out of her hand, like I'm a vampire. When you go to a vampire and put garlic here, and he goes, oh, she took a bacon out like that bacon means something to us. So go and cook your bacon and eat it. No one's got a problem with that. So the problem here is this. When you look at the Muslims in history, they live side by side with the Christians and the Jews. They had their churches, their prayer, whatever they want to do, no problem. And we are supposed to be the ones that are accused of stopping. You are here to enforce religion on other people and shove it down their throat. Look at the hypocrisy that's happening today. Be it Bob, be it Hartoon, I'm going to name people, Be it that lady, the only reason they stopped us from praying, wallahi, is because of that. Because you know the police had no problem. The police, even though it was in the policy, they had no problem. Because you can see in the video when that lady speaking, the officer was speaking to his higher up, and he said there's no problem, let them pray. But when they brought the policy into place, they did not do it because of violation of the policy. I'll repeat it again. The only reason is that, wallahi, brothers and sisters, they hate us. And I will mention Nazi Germany again. You know why? Because believe me, Hitler did not come and say, kill the Jews. Because nobody would have done it. You know what happened? It was a gradual dehumanization of the Jews. It was a starting point. They had banners and they had posters of Jews with big noses and evil-looking creatures, and that's exactly what's happening to us today. And eventually, if we don't stand up to it and talk and we obey by the law of the land, the police officer spoke to Steve, the tall guy, amazing guy. He came, he reasoned with us, we talked with him. We know they're doing their job. We don't blame them, but just know we have to stand up and talk to this, and that's about it from me.
Yeah. So just to kind of reiterate,
I agree, and I'm English.
Thank you very much.
And you're a Christian.
Thank you. So what we're saying, just to reiterate the point here, the point is what we've put in place is a 3-strike policy. If we see a group of Christians or Jews or Sikhs or whatever congregating in a religious worship type congregation, what has to happen is that evidence will be presented to the panel of 5 people. They will judge whether that is a transgression of the police or whether the police have an acceptable excuse. If that happens 3 times, we will no longer comply by the regulation because no one is, because we are being exclusivized in treatment, and that is of course a step towards the Nuremberg laws that you were referring to. One last thing, guys, and this is the last thing we're going to say, is that look at it's interesting you're saying this because just recently, 2-3 weeks ago, there was this whole palaver about freedom of speech, and no one here is talking about freedom of religious expression. It's really, really interesting because why not talk about freedom of religious expression? Now we've started a petition which you guys, inshallah, will put it in the description boxes of these particular channels we have control over, that to change the regulation, because that's the best way of doing it and to secure it for future generations, to change the regulation to allow for a congregation. Now, I would recommend to the policymakers, by the way, that there is an upper limit, because you can imagine here being Eid prayers, like you can't imagine 3,000-4,000 people, that could be problematic. Make an upper limit of a congregational prayer of, for example, 10, 15, 20, whatever you want, but don't disallow people in a place where it's meant to be freedom of speech and expression to express themselves in whichever way possible, which doesn't harm anyone else, which is in accordance with the harm principle and liberalism in general.
I just want to finish off with those who kind of stopped us from doing this. Don't think that you've done nothing. You know what you've done, because we can have congregations further down, and every step we take towards our salah is reward for us. So to be honest, don't think you've done something. The only reason we're mentioning this is because we know your hatred is going to grow, and we just want to put a stop to it. Allah bless you guys.
Any questions? Yeah, go ahead.
If I do pray, what law am I breaking?
If you pray individually, you're not even breaking the regulation in congregation.
Me, you and Ali stood up right now and pray. What they're going to arrest me for?
They're not going to arrest you.
What can they lock me up for?
They're not going to lock you up. Yeah, so the consequences, as far as I know, there are no particular consequences.
In
reality, they can't stop us from praying. But we're not going to pray in congregation just to abide by the politician, to keep the peace.
Exactly.
What's the name? But I just want to know that if I pray in a congregation and I decide to pray, then the brother just go on.
The main point,
they can't lock me up.
You're right. But brother, the main thing is here that the Muslims unify upon one particular policy, and the Islamic unity is greater than the congregation in one particular area.
I just want the brothers to know that if you do pray, you're not going to get arrested.
Yeah.
But we're not going to pray in congregation.
No, of course, I'll respect to the cause of that.
So this is like we're making it public what our stance is.
I just want to ask our Christian friend, like, what was the point that he agreed with us on, and like, what you were saying about Nazi Germany, and then there seems to be this kind of agenda that's going on in the media, which is gradually demonizing Muslims. I pick up on that. I can see that. Would you agree that there is hate preachers who push that narrative?
I don't want to go there, but the two things I would say is I agree with what you said about it happening by stealth. They're gradually demonizing Muslims and associating all Muslims with terrorism, and I think that's totally wrong. As a white English Christian person who was born and brought up here.
Were they disturbing you at all?
No, and also this is supposed to be a haven of freedom of speech and liberty of conscience and freedom of religion. Now, when I came here, I prayed. I just stopped by the fence there and I prayed. I wasn't disturbing anyone. Nobody was bothered. I wasn't troubling anybody. And you know, and then I came in here and went and listened to various speakers. And if Muslims have to pray specifically 5 times a day, so obviously if it reaches that point of the day and they're here all day, they're going to have to go somewhere and pray. So just let Muslims pray. We believe in.
As a Christian, it doesn't disturb you in any way.
Not in the slightest.
You've before, correct?
You know why it doesn't disturb him? Because he doesn't have hate in his heart. It's simple as. If you don't like something, you're going to use for any excuse to hate it. So that's the difference between him and those people. He doesn't have hate. They do.
Yeah, probably that's it.
Thank you, my friend. Very good contribution. Anyways, guys, any other last questions? Any other last questions? No? Okay, Jazakumullah khairan.
We're going twice.
That's
3
it.
times. Okay,
Thank you very much.
Sold to the young gentleman there.
That's it, done.